Hi everyone, welcome to TikTok Cultures Research Network's 5th event. This is entitled TikTok Research Books Roundtable. My name is Abidin. I am the founder of the TikTok Research Network, and I am very excited to host all of you here today. I'm going to give us a few brief pointers before I send you to our main host for today. And before that, please do bear with me with a few instructions. Please do note that all the presentations today are being recorded and they will be uploaded and archived on tiktokcultures.com. The Q&A as well as the chat box will be kept confidential. Attendees, you're more than welcome to use the Q&A function to ask presenters questions at any time. And you're also welcome to follow us along on our Twitter feed at TikTok Cultures and the same with the hashtag. Our TCRN network is also open for global membership, so you're more than welcome again to check us out at tiktokcultures.com/global members. Now in today's TikTok Research Books Roundtable, we're very excited to bring to you the first 3 research books on the topic by a group of scholars from the network and beyond, published between 2021 and 2023. But before we get to that, please do allow me to give you a few more brief introductions and thanks for what has allowed this event to happen. I'm now going to transit to a very brief video for a welcome to country from Emeritus Professor Simon Forrest.
Kaye Wanju. Hello and welcome. My name is Simon Forrest Burungu. I'm a Wajak Baladong Noongar with kin connections to Yamaji and Wongai peoples. I am of this land and place. I follow a bloodline of people who have walked and cared for this land for over 40,000 years. This is a welcome to country, a welcome to Wajak Noongar Buja. A welcome to country recognises and acknowledges us in the first and continuing custodians of this land, Australia. Nidja Bolo, Nidja Gungunga, Nidja Maragarap, Nidja Mindara. Kaye Wanju, and well, Simon Forrest Burungu. Kaye Wanju, Nidja Wajak Noongar Buja. Nal Karich Noongar Moa. Ken Karat Nidja Buja. Nan Karich Noongar Kapali, Morankoriye.
That's my bad. Thank you to Emeritus Professor Simon Forrest. We also want to share our thank you with the strategic investment funding from the Faculty of Humanities at Curtin, as well as the Social Media Pop Cultures program at CCAT. Ms. Linda Durek, who's part of CCAT, has offered us background support. Ms. Caroline West is in charge of all this very beautiful illustrative book you see here. And we also want to thank our network global members, Arencia, Vicando, Verdu, as well as Tom Devon, who are taking over our live Twitter feed today. I'm also very excited to announce for the first time our next event for Q3 and Q4 of this year, featuring the topics TikTok and diaspora, as well as TikTok and children. So if either of these are up your alley and you'd like to join us, please do register to keep informed of events, or maybe to even come and co-participate, co-organize, or co-host across institutes. Now, for those of us who might not be aware of the TCRN, or if you're a first-time attendee, we are an Asia-Pacific-based network founded in October 2020, primarily catering to researchers of TikTok cultures who take a qualitative approach to looking at these events. We provide scholarly resources, we spearhead research projects through grant funding, and more importantly, our main events usually focus on bringing together expertise voices, as well as presentation, as well as publication opportunities for postgraduate, Global South, and ESL mentees, mostly in the Asia Pacific and Global South regions. If you'd like to find out a bit more about what we do, we invite you to check out our website to go through our past events, starting in 2020, having looked at cultures of TikTok in the Asia Pacific, then moving on to youth cultures in the age of COVID-19, TikTok methodologies, and most recently, TikTok and social movements. Now, in these collections, we're soon going to be releasing additional special issues to the one we've already published thus far in IJOC, coming out in the journals TVNM, that's television and new media, as well as SM+S, social media and society. More about us. With our global membership, although we're founded in the Asia Pacific region, we are also supported by a very important group of key regional leaders who are experts in this field in where they locate around the world, as well as in their subject topics. Larger than that, we have a global network of members whose works, presence, and press releases we archive on our site that also doubles up as a space for reporters and industry partners to go through as they're trying to broker partnerships with academia. Just before this event, we relaunched our key themes, which will be guiding TCRN's direction for the next 3 years. 6 of them are listed here, and you're more than welcome to check out if any of these cater to your research interest needs so that we can cooperate in the future. And finally, I'm very excited again to re-announce once more after putting this out on our Twitter feed and our email lists that our second social media resource, Social Media Pop Cultures Looking at Social Justice, was launched just earlier this year. This provides a resource, a framework for thinking about how to do social justice work or how to study social justice work, looking at how TikTok, influencers, and other platforms can be used as vehicles of pop culture. And last year, we launched our inaugural report, a TikTok syllabus for instructors who are wanting to teach social cultural issues on TikTok. Now, without further ado, what you came here for today is our TikTok Research Books Roundtable, featuring 3 of these books that we've earlier mentioned. And it's at this point that I'm very excited to hand you over to our moderator, Daniela Jaramillo-Dent. Over to you, please.
Thank you very much, Crystal. To the audience, good morning, good afternoon, depending on where you are. We have some attendees from time zones where it is early morning or the middle of the night. And I would like to express our special appreciation for attending at such an early time. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Daniela Jaramillo-Dent. I am based in southern Spain. I am a doctoral candidate in communication at Erasmus University Rotterdam and University of Huelva, doing a joint PhD exploring immigrant content creators on Instagram and TikTok. It is with great pleasure that I welcome you to the 5th event by the TikTok Cultures Research Network. This time, we're fortunate to have the authors of the first book-length publications about TikTok, with different perspectives and insights about a platform that has garnered over 1 billion monthly active users and is expected to become the 3rd largest social networking site in 2022. The goal of this roundtable is to engage in a meaningful discussion about TikTok as a site of interest to researchers, students, and industry from a variety of vantage points. The event will run as follows. After this introduction, each of the authors will outline their book and provide insights into one key topic, argument, or case study for 5 minutes each. This will be followed by a moderated Q&A for 30 minutes, and we will then move to an audience Q&A for an additional 20 minutes. To audience members, please remember to submit your questions through the Q&A. Without further ado, I would like to introduce our panelists. For the first book, Renegades, Digital Dance Cultures from Dub Smash to TikTok, published in 2021, we have Dr. Trevor Boffone. He's a Houston, Texas-based educator whose work using TikTok with his students has been featured on Good Morning America, ABC News, Inside Edition, and Access Hollywood, among numerous US national media platforms. Besides the book he will be discussing today, he is also the editor of TikTok Cultures in the United States. We're also delighted to welcome the 3 co-authors of the second book, TikTok Creativity and Culture in Short Video. This book is forthcoming in July 2022. The first author, Dr. Bondy Valdovinos Kaye, is a lecturer at Queensland University of Technology, an adjunct research fellow at Curtin University, and an incoming postdoctoral research fellow at the University of Leeds. Bondy's research interests include decolonizing scholarship, creator studies, platform governance, and digital music. Dr. Meg Jing Zheng is a senior research and teaching associate at the University of Zurich, Switzerland. Her research interests include platform studies, online activism, and digital methods. Since 2018, she has been studying science communication, youth activism, and content moderation on short video platforms, including Douyin and TikTok. Dr. Patrick Wickstrom is a professor of media and communication at QUT and director of QUT's Digital Media Research Center in Brisbane, Australia. His research is focused on how digital technologies shape music economies and cultures, and on the role of sound in digital culture. And last, but by no means least, the third book, forthcoming in January 2023, is TikTok and Youth Cultures by Dr. Crystal Abidin. She's the founder of the TikTok Cultures Research Network. She's a digital anthropologist and ethnographer of vernacular internet cultures, and researches internet celebrity, influencers, and social media pop cultures. She has published 5 books and over 60 articles and chapters on various aspects of internet cultures. Crystal is Associate Professor of Internet Studies, Principal Research Fellow, and ARC-DECRA Fellow at Curtin University. As you can see, we have a brilliant panel of experts in the field. To start this off, in this first section, our panelists will introduce each of the books for 5 minutes each. With that, I am happy to give the floor to our first panelist, Dr. Trevor Boffone.
Thank you, Daniela, and thank you everyone who has made this possible. Bondy, Crystal, everyone. This is exciting, and it's also 2:13 a.m. in Texas where I am, and I'm not exactly a night owl, so bear with me a little bit. But I'm really excited to talk about my book, which came out last year, Renegades, Digital Dance Cultures from Dub Smash to TikTok. And this book, a few quick things about my work in general. My work on TikTok is very United States centered. I'm in Texas, in Houston, which is the 3rd biggest city in the country. Chicago is not happy with that one. But my work is very much centered on what is happening culturally with TikTok. I know because there's regional differences. I just want to be mindful of that. My work is also autoethnographic. I'm very tired. Autoethnographic, and I really focus on my own experiences with my high school students. So I teach at university, but I also teach full-time high school Spanish, actually. And so I'm working with young teenagers for about 40 hours a week. And so it's this like insanely intense field work where I'm getting firsthand, like focus group work with students where I'm asking them questions about TikTok, and we're talking about the sounds and the trends and the ways that they approach this platform. So that's really germane to my work as well. And then also I have my own experiences with virality, going viral, influencer life, and all of that as well. So that's all kind of packed into what this book is. Primarily, my work is looking at Black TikTokers, Black social media users, mostly teenagers, people who are in their young 20s, who are using these apps as ways to build community. They're looking at how to connect, how race and other factors of identity play out through these apps, such as Instagram, Dub Smash, Triller, and primarily TikTok. I'm also looking at how a lot of what is happening on TikTok in the United States is a reflection of larger cultural trends in this country that have been happening for centuries, right? Especially in terms of this of race relations in the United States. And also I'm looking at how community is formed. And my work, my scholarship, I'm a theater person, and everything I do really looks at how community is formed, different strategies that people use to connect, and how things that are happening on social media are not always just digital, right? There's a lot of analog community building that happens as well, right? So my book, there's 2 different parts of the book. There's parts of it that half of it looks at Black influencers who are really setting the culture on TikTok. So we can look, the title of the book, Renegades, comes from the Renegade Dance Challenge, which has been the most viral, the most performed dance challenge in TikTok history. There's about 35 million videos of just Renegade Dance Challenge. And how that worked, I'm good on time. But really how that worked, we're talking about Black content creators who created this culture that was then replicated and pushed out far beyond TikTok. And also, a lot of the things in that kind of realm, right, are very similar to, they keep coming up, right? So the book came out last year, but since then we've had the Jimmy Fallon issue where Addison Rae went on Jimmy Fallon and taught 8 TikTok dances that were primarily created by Black creators without giving credit to them. And then also we had last summer, was it last, yeah, 2021. I'm starting to like lose my pandemic years are all like meshed into one, where we had the Black TikTok creator strike in the United States when Megan Thee Stallion released her song Thought Shit, right? So the same conversations keep coming up in the United States around cultural appropriation, Black exploitation, and really the way that white creators and white TikTokers are making their money, making their fame off of the backs of Black content creators. So that's really what my book is about. So the first half of the book, again, is about the influencers, and the second half is about my high school classroom. And I look at what that looks like in a context where I'm working with young people. And so, and that's, I think, what makes my research a bit different, right, is that I'm coming at it from a very much a perspective of someone who's in the middle of it, right? And so I talk about 2 different things with my students. We talk about how we work together, right? So how TikTok can be, this is why the TikTok and children thing is very interesting to me, because how can TikTok be a way to build intergenerational bonds and also bonds between people across difference, right? Across racial differences, ethnic differences, and so on and so forth. So the school I work at, we're a big Texas high school. We have about 3,500 students, mostly students of color, right? So if you look me up, if you Google me, you'll see I'm mostly making content, making videos, I'm dancing with students of color, primarily Black students, right? And so I look at it as a way of really building community across difference. And I'm actually about at time, but I'm really excited to be here. I could talk about this for a long time, although I am tired. It is 2:20 in the morning, which is exciting and terrifying to me. But I will hand it over to our next panelist.
Thank you so much, Trevor. Just a lot to think about. Let's see what Bondy has to say about the second book, TikTok Creativity, Culture in Short Video, coming up.
Thanks, Daniela. And thank you, Trevor, for being here. You're in the same time zone as my parents, and they are very much asleep right now. So I appreciate you joining from halfway across the world. So this book began as a joke, to be perfectly honest. I got interested in TikTok after having the opportunity to visit ByteDance Beijing headquarters with a group of graduate students in 2019. A few months later, I started researching TikTok with some friends at my university as kind of a fun side project during my PhD. But then when my PhD supervisor got involved in 2020, I kind of half jokingly suggested, why don't we write a book about this? I don't want to downplay the challenges of trying to write a book immediately after finishing a PhD on a topic that had nothing to do with my actual dissertation research. But before I start talking about the book, I just want to mention how absolutely grateful I am for the opportunity to work on a project like this with one of my closest friends and one of my mentors, how fascinated I am by the things that I've learned over the past couple of years, and really how proud I am of the finished product. And I hope that those of you who have a chance to pick it up when it releases in July will find it interesting and valuable as well. And I also want to give a special shout out to our amazing editor, Mary Savigar, and editorial assistant, Stephanie Homer at Polity Press. Okay, let's talk about the actual book. This book explores the roots of short video. We're exploring more about the challenges and the issues connected to developing and growing a transnational Chinese digital platform. We're looking at some of the issues facing the creators and some of the ways that communities form who are responsible for the platform's growth and success. In the book, we draw on some theories from psychological sciences to look at creativity. We draw on some concepts from the field of mobile communication to talk about community and cultural dynamics. And primarily, we are drawing quite a bit from the emerging body of platformization of cultural production research to look at TikTok at 3 distinct levels: its infrastructures, its markets, and governance. So in the book itself, this is kind of boring, but I'll just kind of run through the outline in my time. After we detail some of our key arguments and our concepts at the introduction, we begin proper with a concise history of short video platforms, both in China and internationally. We account for all of the different kinds of features and functions that were developed before TikTok on platforms like Snapchat, Instagram, Dubsmash, Flipagram, that have become staples of the short video genre and on TikTok. We then go into the first part of our platformization analysis by looking at the infrastructures of TikTok. Specifically, we're interested in the affordances and features that have now distinguished TikTok from other short video platforms, and the features that encourage what we term social creativity and those that place more of an emphasis on sound and on music. Then we take a short detour to examine communities on TikTok by looking at some of the most popular creators that have millions and millions of followers, as well as smaller groups of creators, including a case study of Jazz Talk, a community of musical TikTokers who connected together in 2020 to make music using, among other things, the TikTok duet feature. I am a recovering jazz musician, so I was particularly excited about that case study and have expanded on it a little bit in another paper that was published earlier this year. But after talking about TikTok communities, we continue our short detour with additional case studies of environmental and political activism on the platform. In addition, we expand on a concept of circumscribed creativity, how the platform encourages users to get involved in certain types of challenges and to do certain types of use certain types of visual effects and filters, which is a concept that Meg, my co-author, and our friend Xi Chen introduced in earlier work published in 2021, I think. After that, we get back to our platformization analysis and we start looking at markets and economies, not only looking at the e-commerce strategies and the very popular and yet controversial TikTok Creator Fund, but also a case study specifically looking at TikTok and the music industry that draws on some of Patrick's extensive work in that field. We wrap up our platformization analysis by looking at TikTok's governance and review the challenges that TikTok has faced in various jurisdictions around the world that have resulted in high-profile lawsuits and outright bans. We consider how the platform handles copyright, and we discuss the concept of visibility governance, which Meg and I decided we would elaborate on a little bit further in another recent article that came out earlier this year. We end the book with our thoughts and reflections on the future of short video industry, short video platforms, and what's next for TikTok. In the subtitle of our book, it kind of gives the game away and shows a lot about what our scope and focus was and our interests. We're really interested in the impact of TikTok for creative expression, creative interaction, and creative industry. And we're really interested in how TikTok has influenced platform cultures around the world. Hope that the readers of our book will gain a better understanding of how TikTok fits in the international platform society and maybe get some new ideas of their own for studying creativity and culture on TikTok and beyond. That's the end of my prepared statement. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Bondy. I think you've described, I think your book is really amazing. It reflects the convergence of the 3 co-authors and their lines of research, so I'm looking forward to it. Now, please, Dr. Abidin, could you tell us about your book, TikTok and Youth Cultures, to be coming up on 2023?
Thanks, Daniela, and also thank you to Trevor, being very nocturnal, and Bondy for sharing your various books as well. My book is titled TikTok and Youth Cultures, and like Bondy, there's an origin story to how I came upon TikTok. This is not usually the version you tell reporters or the hiring committee, but the reality of it is I followed TikTok from an earlier version of an app called Dubsmash. Those of you who are familiar with short video cultures, one of the very big popular trends on Dubsmash was for people to do literally dubbing over very exaggerated conversations, very exaggerated punchlines, usually from some sort of melodrama, and people would really act out with their hands and their facial expressions. I came onto Dub Smash because I was following a group of influencers from my research based out of Singapore who were using Dub Smash dubs as a way to throw shade or to criticize people in the community without really naming who they were throwing shade at. And as that app evolved, some of them then went into Musical.ly, where they had other talents to do with dancing. And then when Musical.ly got bought over onto TikTok, that area of research converged with my East Asian research that I already looked at Douyin in Shanghai. So when those apps came together under the company ByteDance, it just made sense for me to consolidate all of my research together. And it's also for that reason that the key focus in my book looks at the idea of attention, whether we're channeling it, suppressing it, trying to do any sort of impression management. Obviously, this is also because I first followed my informants from the influencer industry and the digital advertising industry into this space. The approach for my book is primarily anthropological and also takes root in some of the media studies concepts. But more importantly, it's got two main focuses. The first is that it looks at the Asia Pacific region. So a lot of the stories and people's feelings about some major TikTok milestones like the Trump ban or the supposed blaxploitation have very different angles and stories coming out of the people who were either observing this or who felt very local and regional aspects of these phenomena unfold. The second focus of my book is that it tells stories from the grassroots. What do people on TikTok actually really feel, or what do they experience on a daily basis, despite and in spite of all the very top level conversations and concerns we have about, say, privacy, regulation, governance, and even the recent buyovers and buyouts across different countries. The book takes the shape of 5 chapters. The first one looks at origin stories and platform wars, where here I interview groups and groups of advertising agencies, influencer incubators, as well as creators over how they came onto TikTok. And of course, a lot of this highlights how it was really the COVID-19 pandemic that gave them the pause and the time to sink their teeth into what they thought was going to take a long time for them to uptake in this space. Platform wars also refers to this really, really strange hold that Instagram and TikTok have across each other from the very beginning when TikTok was taking root in some countries and mass harvested the top Instagrammers from some countries to be seated on the app, all the way to the most recent news update we have where Instagram was going to deplatform and also de-rank posts that were cross-posted from other platforms onto its space. The second chapter looks at performance and community. My favorite part of this chapter is when we are looking at these sorts of bricolage chains involving animals and the cute sounds they make. My personal favorite is the soundtrack called Shy Little Frog, which begins with a frog just innocently croaking, and then very bored but also very talented TikTok musicians layering on the croaking with instruments, harmony singing, drum beats, and the next thing you know, it's up on iTunes for purchase. So my personal collection of these TikToks involves num-num cats, dogs who whine, birds who chirp a certain amazing sound, especially if they're based out of Australia. And the performance and community here sometimes is surrounding around virality that is very unexpected when it's disparate and crowdsourced from groups of people. The third chapter, which is very much in my wheelhouse, looks at attention and celebrity. The fourth chapter looks at small business and marketplace cultures. And one of the things I focus on in this chapter is this very quaint culture we have on TikTok, where people are guilt-tripped into supporting small businesses. You might be very familiar with these audio memes and sounds that tell you, don't stop scrolling, I am a small business. If you do not support me and instead buy from Amazon, you are a bad person. So this sense of this underdog thriving on TikTok through guilt tripping or through trying to tug at the heartstrings of people is a very different way we use attention as compared to predecessor apps, say like Drama on YouTube or middle-class and luxurious show-off kinds of culture on Instagram. Last but not least, following the heart of the young people who push through the attention economy on TikTok and then want to bring forth a personal message, Chapter 5 looks at everyday politics and social movements, where I look at how young people use all sorts of vernacular from dancing, makeup, comics, to hijack first your attention and then deliver a social justice or social movement-oriented message to viewers. That's that from the book. It's going to be out in 2023. So for now, what will be circulated here as well as in the Twitter feed is a sign-up sheet if you'd like a notification when it's ready for pre-order. Thank you, and I'm happy to hand the time back to Daniela.
Thank you so much, Crystal. And thank you, the three authors who have described the books. Thank you for providing these thought-provoking insights from your research. These presentations tell us a lot about the great variety of vantage points from which this platform can be studied and the cases that characterize it, with a definite emphasis on music and choreography, but also a reflection of wider issues in contemporary societies and new forms of celebrity, attention, and visibility. We also see a diversity in the geographic focuses from the US to Asia, and the cultures from African American culture to the appropriation that takes place in this platform. Now, with this in mind, I would like to move to some questions and discussion. We will do a Q&A, a moderated Q&A for 30 minutes. And in this case, I would like to pose a question to our authors. First, Trevor, considering that your book provides this comparative analysis of TikTok and Dubsmash, could you tell us a little bit about how TikTok differs from other social media sites that you have researched?
Yeah, so again, yeah, my book looks at these different social media apps that young people are using in the US, TikTok, Triller, Instagram, Dubsmash. And the thing that I find most, I guess, interesting about TikTok is the sheer size of it and the cultural reach of it, right? So Dubsmash, it does not exist anymore, right? And other sites like Triller, at least in the US, are very much trying to replicate, the TikTok effect, I guess. And so I'm also looking at how the TikTok culture actually is influencing these other sites as well, right? So Instagram, basically at the Reels, just like Crystal was just saying, with the cross posting, right, with YouTube Shorts as well, it's basically TikTok, right? They're trying to replicate TikTok. Is it successful or not? I'm not sure at the moment, but I find that is what's interesting about TikTok and how it is differed, is how it is so much larger, at least in the US. Like my students, they also will use TikTok as a code for any sort of dance thing. Do you want to make a TikTok? Even if they're not actually making a TikTok, they're using TikTok language as the way that they speak. It's their new slang, right? And so there's an interesting reach happening, at least right now. I'm also, I think, as TikTok is growing, there is, again, my research is very US focused, but TikTok is thoroughly ingrained in like every aspect of culture here in the US. So if you go to a bookstore, you walk in and the first thing you see is as seen on Book Talk, right? Or at the grocery stores, there's sections at the end of the aisles, right? Where it's like how to make the feta cheese or feta pasta recipe, or here's this other recipe that went viral, or this thing. So the stores are actually, we're seeing material effects of TikTok, right? Which is something that I do not remember really seeing from, say, Instagram or Twitter, right? The buying power of TikTok is a bit further and a bit more ingrained in material culture. So those are a few things I'm thinking about. But really, I think what's most fascinating to me working with teenagers is how TikTok is ingrained in every aspect of their lives, even if they are not on TikTok at all, right? They're still on TikTok.
Thank you, Trevor. I think what you just mentioned really reflects what you described before, how there are some analog aspects of the platforms, how they are ingrained in culture, in their conversations, in their language, and just in a lot of interactions that may not take place on TikTok, but that are very relevant to the study of platforms, how they are becoming hybrid, right? I would like to hear from maybe Meg Jing, and also if you would like to answer the same question, what do you think are the main differences that you have seen from TikTok and other platforms?
Thank you, Daniela, for the question. I think I would like to answer that question from the perspective of a media scholar who has been focusing a lot on Chinese social media. So for me, the special thing about TikTok is that for the first time, I have a pretty much identical parallel platform from within China, which I can compare. So, you know, before the research always goes like, this is Twitter and this is Chinese copycat of Twitter. This is YouTube. There's a Chinese copycat of YouTube. And for the first time, this is a platform that has gone mainstream in the West, which has, you know, a heavy Chinese roots in there. So this kind of geopolitical or, you know, political economy of this platform, for me, makes this platform a very exceptional case. And also to see the cross-platform, cross-cultural exchange between these two platforms, something, you know, Crystal and I, we are actually in the process of producing more scholarship around that, how creators copy, paste, download things from one platform and directly upload it to another. And also the geopolitical complicity makes the whole topic of governance, moderation become particularly controversial when you compare these two Chinese and European American markets. Yeah, that's the point I would like to highlight here, something special about TikTok for me, for my own research.
Thank you, Meg. I think it is very interesting that when we study a platform from different cultures and different perspectives, how Trevor is able to see that in America, it has become an important part of the American culture, and it's just becoming cross-sectional in American culture. But you mentioned how it definitely has characteristics that are very Chinese, and that its Chinese roots, how they're able to cross to other cultures and become so popular and applicable to everyone. Now, I would like to hear from Crystal. What do you think are the main, we have touched on a lot of interesting points, but maybe from your perspective, what would be the differences between TikTok and other platforms?
I'm going to come from the perspective of influencers and internet celebrities, which is what my research primarily focuses on. So looking at these top 1% of users of the platform, I would say that prior to this, having written a book on Tumblr as well as Instagram, these influencers used to be wanting a very singular branding across platforms. So if you're on YouTube, the captions would say something like, here's my Insta, here's my TikTok, here's my Etsy, here's my website. If you're on Twitter, they're going to cramp all of that in their bio. And that was a way for them to get cross-platform flow across all the different apps. What I'm seeing on TikTok, though, is that a lot of these creators are now moving towards less of a consolidated self-brand. And perhaps it's because the app has an inertia to being consolidated. There are only so few spaces where there are links that are clickable or that flow out. You know, it's not like you can spam in a comment section and people can click here and there, or tag a partner easily or a brand as easily. And although the future might change. So a lot of the influencers that I followed through at least 5 or 6 different apps onto TikTok very distinctly have a brand identity that it's different, a different persona, a different voice. I won't name who, but this is one very, very popular Asian American creator who was first very, very big on YouTube. On the space of TikTok, she takes the persona of this very ditzy, low socioeconomic status, doggy Asian person who's always speaking in broken English, always with a very messy bun, always intentionally messy with bed linen everywhere. And one of the big controversies in her beat is that when people found out she's actually not new, she didn't just stumble onto TikTok, she's like a 10-year veteran YouTuber who's actually drop dead gorgeous with a fashion line and who's got like mini web series all over YouTube. They were very, very confused because no one really put 2 and 2 together before. But for creators and influencers like her, the breakaway from this legacy that they had on previous apps and the ability to be creative and to play with a different type of branding altogether on TikTok was very useful. It also allowed a lot of those middle tier and lower tier influencers from other platforms to find a different beat on TikTok and then climb up. The second thing to me that's very, very shocking based out of my research in Shanghai is that TikTok seems to be a lot more gate-kept than the previous apps in the world of influencers. When I was in Shanghai doing field work, it involved looking at, attending and speaking to a lot of brokers. They were mostly Europeans who are in China trying to bring Chinese culture to Europe and also broker European brands into the Chinese market. And they always priced themselves as these mediators who understood both Douyin and TikTok, or both WeChat and WhatsApp, and offered to help brands with no cultural knowledge to speak to the other. Now, in reality, a lot of what you want to find out about TikTok is available on the app if you were to scroll through all these cultures. If you dig deep, read the policy documents, read regulation documents, it's there. But there seems to be a tendency to culturally exoticize TikTok because of its ByteDance origins and to obscure a lot of the accessibility that's already there. And this has really given rise to this emergent class of brokers who are gatekeeping, say, Chinese TikTok, gatekeeping what it means to be migrant TikTok for others who just want an easy in route into the app to gain an audience and then to sell a message. Meg Xingcheng has alluded to this in an earlier conversation. Both of us are looking at what diaspora may do on TikTok, how other people may introduce Chinese TikTok on the app by just copying and pasting contents actually straight out of Douyin. And they gain a lot of followers, a lot of credibility, without really doing anything other than copy and pasting, but see themselves as these filters to shape people's understandings of cultures between the apps. So that brokerage, the gatekeeping, and the resistance to being consolidated is interesting for me.
Thank you very much, Crystal. I think it is very interesting that what you're saying really matches what you mentioned before, that you are taking a more grassroots perspective on the platform and how you're looking at how it is different from other platforms from the perspective of what creators are doing, how they are adapting their content and their branding to the platform itself. And the idea of gatekeeping and broker, it just shows how, on the one hand, we have the appropriation mentioned by Trevor before, and on the other hand, we have the gatekeeping, just making culture, like tokenizing culture in order to maybe blog or limit who can create and who can monetize. So I think it's interesting, all of these different perspectives. And for the second question, Trevor, considering how fluid the social media ecosystem is and considering everything we've discussed before, what do you think the future of TikTok will be?
That is such a big question. The future of TikTok. I think what we're seeing, and there was a great question in the Q&A, which I'm sure we'll come back to later, is just how thoroughly ingrained TikTok becomes in other digital spaces, but also in analog spaces, in material spaces. I think that's something that is exciting to me. I also think, at least in the United States, there's this really, a lot of tension, right, with creators of color, with US Latinx creators, Black creators, Asian Americans, so on and so forth, non-white creators. There's this tension over, people are really tired of their work not, their content being treated differently, or white content creators like Charli D'Amelio, Addison Rae, so on and so forth, like TikTok boys and these TikTok e-girls, how they really are benefiting from culture that's created by other folks. And so there's a lot of tension around this, especially on Black Twitter is where a lot of the conversation happens, where it's around, the conversation is very much, we want a space for us, by us, that is free from these white supremacist structures, right? Which are happening in the US at least. And so I don't know, but at the same time, everyone's aware that TikTok is the powerhouse. TikTok is the place where all of this is happening. So people will continue to go to TikTok. So I'm not sure what will happen in that regard, but that's a conversation that I'm very much following. The people I'm working with are very much attuned to that as well. So it's curious, right? Especially in the US, if we look at also TikTok's, the mysterious side of TikTok, right? Content moderation, the shady stuff that TikTok has done, right? So the example I always talk about is in 2020, in the US at least, you could not, or May, June 2020, you could not really avoid footage of police brutality happening at the anti-police brutality rallies on TikTok, right? With the Black Lives Matter movement, that was all over TikTok in the US. It was dominated the app. By August of 2020, all of a sudden there was no content anywhere. It was not showing up on your FYP unless you were following specific folks. You were not seeing protest content, right? And then a year later, when we had the verdict from the George Floyd murder in the US, all content was moderated, right? Was held, right? and they were avoiding any of these hot takes about the verdict, right? Because they didn't want, they don't want, TikTok doesn't want it to be a place where people go and are confronted with racism and so on and so forth, right? They want it to be a place that's aspirational, that makes people happy, it makes them want to come back to. It's escapist, right? In a lot of ways. So those are kind of things that are very much in the ether in the United States, and I think are really going to dictate how people approach this platform going forward.
I really like the idea that maybe minority creators and their activism may be part of shaping TikTok in the future. It's very related to my own research, but I think that would be very interesting to see, as well as the idea of this content that is not hasn't been really accepted, the Black Lives Matter, violent content, and that also comes from some governments that have been more limiting in terms of what can be visible publicly, and maybe that is why TikTok handles this type of content a little differently from other platforms. Considering that, let's see what Patrick has to say about the future of TikTok. What do you think it may be?
Thanks, Daniela. Yes, as Trevor said, this is a big question, and who knows, right? But just to add some thoughts to this, and one aspect that I think is interesting that we try to get into in the book is this concept of parallel platformization that you see with Douyin and TikTok, and that this might be an indication of how the platform economy might evolve in the future, where you have not only China and the West, or the US, if you wish, or as the two poles, but you have a whole range of different poles where with platforms that have different dynamics and cultures and practices and so on and so forth. So I think that's one interesting aspect, not only related to TikTok, but in relation to the platform economy as a whole. The other one is obviously generations. And I think Trevor was talking about generations earlier, and Crystal is writing about youth culture. And the question is, what will the future of TikTok be like? Will it be youthful in the sense that we look at it right now? Or will it go in the same way as Facebook, and that we in 5 years time or in 10 years time we will see an aging user community of TikTok and a different way of using the creative expressions that you see today on TikTok. What will that be like? Will it be as fun and positive and inspiring as it is today, or will the 50-year-olds on TikTok that are dominating would be ruining the whole thing? I think that process is really exciting, and we've seen it in most other platforms, right? So it would be strange if you don't see it on this platform. What will it be like on TikTok? I think that's fascinating. What else? What is happening across the world right now is the governments being more active when it comes to regulation of platforms, right? And that is extremely interesting. We see it in Europe with the Digital Services Act. We see it in Australia. We see it across a range of territories where the governments are trying to regulate platforms. And how will that look like? How will that influence, well, all platforms, but TikTok? It has a special or slightly different, at least, background with its roots in China and not in Silicon Valley. What will the Digital Services Act mean for TikTok? And I'm looking at it, of course, as a researcher and trying, okay, so will this allow us to research TikTok in another way that we haven't been able to in the past? So that changing regulatory space will be extremely interesting to watch, and how TikTok and, of course, other platforms will adapt to it.
Thank you so much. And I think both authors have touched on the top-down perspective of how the platform will develop from governments and just how the platform handles moderation and the type of content that is available. And then the bottom-up perspective from the minority creators on one hand, and then the generations, what ages and what types of content will be generated in the future and who will remain on the platform. And I think this is very interesting. And continuing with the discussion, Crystal, through your research, you have become intimately familiar with the ever-changing nature of digital platforms. I remember when you wrote a book on Instagram and how it was published and immediately there were new types of formats and content that emerged. And these are like the micro forms in which a platform changes. But what do you think the future of TikTok holds?
It's very hard to predict what the platform will do. I remember once upon a time chatting with both Max as well as Bondy. We were talking about when can we start making money on TikTok, or when will live streaming occur? And then we blinked and it was introduced. So I can only predict the future of TikTok based on the practices and the cultures of my informants. I think there are two main things to keep in mind. The first keyword is rhythms, and the second keyword is minority celebrity. So with rhythms, TikTok is a space that's frustrating to the people I interview and study, because for them, it is an app where attention, for the first time in a long time, is not attached to affect. To derive people's interest in yourself, it's difficult to gain loyalty or to cultivate loyalty as you usually would when you update frequently on an app. The rhythms on TikTok here mostly rely on parachuted interest. If you have a post that goes viral once, people might sign up, subscribe, follow you. But then for you to generate that same type of virality or engagement again, oftentimes as a creator, you end up becoming a one-trick pony, producing the same post again and again. It is for this reason that we see a lot of the reaction TikTokers become very stable and very popular. It is a very comfortable and familiar beat for us to understand what they deliver to us. Whether it's a very flamboyant gay man in Australia reacting to paint that's being mixed and then guessing the color, or a whole host of Black creators who've now occupied a very niche space, reacting with why, or an angry face, or a hand sign. I don't even have to name them, but by describing the gestures that they do, you can already remember the three creators here. So for them, these post-based virality and having pigeonholed them into these so-called one-trick ponies makes it difficult for them to showcase any other of their talents. It also makes it difficult for some of these TikTokers then to pivot into becoming influencers where they get to sell brands, sell a story, sell a lifestyle, because their content as creators, not full-fledged influencers, is quite limited. The second point, the second keyword, minority celebrity, that both authors from each book have already alluded to, refers to this fact, this theory that I coined a few years ago, where people of the minority status in the margins, whether by religion, race, sexuality, gender, a lot of times they become celebrities on the internet because their fame and recognition is founded upon them commodifying what is marginalized about them or what is stigmatized about them. We have seen early origins of this on YouTube, where groups of YouTubers from the It Gets Better movement made fame or celebrity out of themselves talking about growing up gay. On Instagram, a very small group of educators there have been making waves for themselves talking about social justice issues or disability. So for some of these influencers, the validation and the celebration of minoritarian values is what makes them a celebrity. And this is increasingly an expectation from people of influences today. So transpose this into a space like TikTok. What we see happening though is a massive culture of underdogging. Whether or not you're actually privileged or not, of a high socioeconomic status or not, everything tends to be condensed down to how you look. If you appear to be a minority race, you tend to use that. If you appear to have a very visible disability, you tend to showcase that. So underdogging in this space sometimes is a route for bandwagoning, where people are trying to gain attention through some sort of competitive one-downmanship. But in other instances, it's a very sincere way of first capturing people's attentions and then trying to negotiate in the captions or the comment section, the actual socialization work in trying to talk about the condition of these peoples and what they're trying to represent.
Thank you so much, Crystal. I think your description contrasts very in an interesting way with Trevor's, and also, of course, a lot of media coverage of how Black creators and other minorities have said that their content is not as visible as others. So the idea that some people are actually taking these characteristics in order to make themselves more popular is interesting to see how this balance works with this the idea of the algorithmic visibility, etc. So I think we've done a really interesting discussion on these questions. And now I will move to the audience questions, which are great, really. We have really interesting questions here. So let's see what we have. First of all, let's see a question for Trevor from Catalina Guanta. It says, how different are material cultures on TikTok really, given that YouTube and Instagram, okay, this is a long question. So let me try to read it slowly. Okay, it says, how different are material cultures on TikTok really, given that YouTube and Instagram, particularly in certain sectors like beauty, have led to similar online, offline consumer behavior influence? And an example she gives is, think about the sold out beauty items of many influencers like Jeffree Star, James Charles. What empirical evidence do we have of these comparisons?
Excellent question. And I'll start by saying I don't have much empirical evidence, but I do think that there is something different happening now with on TikTok compared to what was happening before with Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, and especially with the beauty community even. And I think there's a few different answers to this. You know, I could talk about the actual material effects all day. I talked about book talk and the reading communities and how it's, if you go to any bookstore right now in the US, you're gonna find that book talk table, and those book talk books, whether they're good literature or not, they are flying off the shelves, right? Also in the US, the Billboard, or this is actually across the world, but like the Billboard music charts are very much now factoring in TikTok plays, right? And TikTok virality, right? So now you have something like, we don't talk about Bruno being this #1 song, which it's a bizarre song to be #1, right? But it very much is influenced from what's happening on TikTok. But I think what's happening that's different is really about, it's really about how I find on other social media apps, you have to really, to be a part of a community, you have to actively seek out the community in a way that TikTok brings the community to you, right? So we've all, I love talking to students and talking to influencers about, or actually just TikTok users, about how the algorithm will give them shockingly accurate content to their lives. And I will say, this is my last day of quarantine. I had COVID, and I got it after I went to Boston a few weeks. I went to Boston, and then 4 days later, I test positive. I'm gonna have all the symptoms. And I get on TikTok, and the video I get is basically like, when you've been on lockdown for, when you've been doing everything right for 2 years, and then you go to Boston for work and let your guard down and you get COVID. And I'm like, how did TikTok know that I went to Boston, I got COVID, I've been like good about everything for 2 years, and all of a sudden I've got this, right? And so the content is such a, it's coming to you in a way that it wasn't coming to you on other social media apps. And so we're able to see different trends and material things happen, like the TikTok tights. I don't know if that was a global thing or not, but all of a sudden everyone's buying these tights that make your butt look very nice, right? Or the feta cheese, right? There was a period of time where like you could not buy feta cheese in Houston, Texas, right? Or cranberry juice, right? When the guy on the longboard was drinking cranberry juice to Fleetwood Mac, right? Like you could not buy cranberry juice. And of course we have, like you mentioned, these, James Charles and different beauty products selling out, but I find this is something that is random. I love what Crystal said about, what was it? Accidental virality, right? These are material effects that are usually not meant to happen. When you try on TikTok is usually when it doesn't work, right? It's when it happens by accident And I think that's what's, exciting for a lot of us here, right? Is that it's unpredictable in a lot of ways, even though it is predictable. And so I think it forces us to become consumers and to buy products in a way that other places are not doing. And I'll add one more thing, and I have nothing smart to say about this, but it's something that I would love to figure out. And I feel like Bondy is the person for this. But I think there's something interesting about the sound bites that go viral on TikTok and what they do to your brain to make you want to buy things. I've never bought stuff from Instagram to Twitter, but I will literally see a TikTok about anything and I'm like, I gotta go buy that. Whether it's a drink or a book or I have to go visit somewhere. And I think it's something to do with the wiring of your brain with the sounds, recognizing the trend, connecting it. It does something interesting. I have not figured it out yet.
Thank you, Trevor. So it would be interesting to get some empirical material for this. These studies are very difficult to do, right? To gather your users and see how they are affected by the content and how they decide, they make decisions. I think most of us here have talked more from the perspective of the platform and the creators, although Trevor does study young people, live, you do ethnography in your classroom. But I think it is interesting to see how these contents are affecting people and how they make their decisions. So let's see, I have a question for Megjing, and it says, what are your opinions? This is from Weldon Setiawan, and it is, what are your opinions about copycat platforms from the West to the rest of the world, or vice versa? And is there any difference between platforms in terms of user behavior, vernacular content, etc.?
Thank you, Vida, for that very interesting question. So about the comparison between TikTok and Douyin, actually, Bondy and our co-author Chen Shu, we had a paper called Parallel Platformization. In there, we did some kind of interface policy kind of comparison, but that was 2 years old analysis. But apart from that kind of material aspect, disparities between these two platforms, I think something very interesting, in my opinion, I think that was also mentioned in the question, is the business model. So something, it's very different. We're talking about content creators, how they make money from the platform. So on the Chinese platform, on Douyin, e-commerce is so integrated into the ecosystem of the platform. It has its own in-app store and the links and also the whole infrastructure made the whole, like Trevor's example, I get hooked by the adverts, not products and TikTok, that kind of thing all the time. But I'm frustrated. I just want to buy it by clicking a link or something on the interface. Now you can see that in the sponsored advertising TikTok, it's possible, but for most of things, it does not have the embedded, ecosystem to support that. But in the Chinese version, it has been around for a very long time. And the whole concept of live commerce, live streaming commerce in Chinese, we call it 带货, 直播带货, it's also very mature, established format. People lively selling things through live streaming. And so that kind of business model, I think, when we were writing the business model chapter, there was a lot of speculation. We were expecting, and we were actually looking at the TikTok was doing the same kind of experiment, but so far it has not taken off. I think it's a lot of complicated reasons behind it. And also another interesting disparity is the long format video. So that's something I personally find very interesting on Douyin, for instance. The very long, hours long short video has also become very popular. For example, in the interface, web interface of Douyin, you can see the whole reality show and TV program co-produced by Douyin. So they launched this kind of whole content creation, professional content creation dimension of experience model, the whole professionalization and making everything longer, more like other platform, Netflix kind of show. It's very interesting, but now I'm still waiting to see if this kind of thing could take place on TikTok. And there is this kind of attempt already to make things longer, but will TikTok become like a Netflix, start to have its own movie, TV show, this kind of trend? Yeah, that's currently, in my opinion, some very interesting disparities between these two platforms. But yeah, other panelists, I'm sure they have more to say about the cultural creativity, vernacular aspect of it.
Sure. Maxine, thank you so much. I think you touched on a lot of very interesting aspects, and this also answers a little bit the question of what may be the future of TikTok. It is possible that these could develop within TikTok as they have developed on other platforms. The idea of a show made especially for a platform is a reality on Facebook, for example. So that is definitely an option. Let's look at a question here that I think it could be very interesting. From Kaye. And he says, Henry Jenkins has talked about the power, and this question is going to be for Crystal. Henry Jenkins has talked about the power of participatory culture on the internet, and we have clearly seen this play out on TikTok, from dubbing to dancing videos that the speakers have talked about. On the other hand, we also know how TikTok is very much also determined by the algorithm, which has its content biases. For example, favoring more conventionally attractive content creators. How optimistic or pessimistic are you personally about the power of TikTok to enable participatory culture from the influencers and audiences? And how do we, both as users and scholars, negotiate the dichotomy between agency and structure on TikTok?
Thanks, Daniela. Thanks, Kaye. It's a very long question. There are many parts to it. I'm going to try my best to remember all the parts. I also like to take this opportunity to issue a clarification, because this bandwagons very nicely on our previous conversation about visibility. So I did mention that among a lot of the TikTok influencers who are minority, race, sexuality, gender, etc., they use the emphasized visibility that they have to brand themselves. But that does not necessarily equate to more visibility to the app, because the key question we have to ask is who's watching. If we were to talk among the grassroots or a very specific target audience, a lot of these minority celebrities feel that they're very, very visible among their own niche communities on TikTok, because the algorithm by design puts them into silos and rabbit holes of communities. So they may feel very visible to these specific groups, and the resonance from the emotional reactions, the intensity of the conversations may make it seem that they are more visible or more seen. But this is qualitative, it's not quantitative. It's not them being more seen by the algorithm, the platform, the app, or a brand, which means that the transposition from their feelings of visibility versus the actual visibility is sometimes disconnected. It also means that the transposition from any felt feelings of visibility to the ability to monetize when people outside of your network see you is also quite fraught. So a lot of these participatory cultures we speak of on TikTok are very intense, but they can also be very siloed in that it's intensely participatory in a very narrow vein with a very niche subculture, which may be not legible or maybe not literate to people outside of this space. Part of the second question, referring to how TikTok is very determined by its algorithm, it's got inherent biases, how optimistic am I about the power of it to enable participatory culture? Well, again, oftentimes because of the design of the app, if I were to take, say, the example of the climate change marches or the Black Summer fires in Australia in December and January every year as an example, many of these young people making TikTok audio memes who are criticizing politicians, being very sarcastic, wonderfully so, and glib about these white men who are ruling the country, are often already speaking to audiences who are looking for this information. It's almost like they're preaching to the choir. In Chinese, there's this idiom where it says, you are playing the piano to a cow. You're speaking to people who don't need this message because they already are your target audience. And it's more difficult for these messages to be coming across the pedestrians on TikTok, the people who need these messages because they're not yet very interested in this social ethos or discourse. So for this reason, back to one of the other conversations from Trevor about audio memes, the viability of sound to bridge across the different silos and subcultures on TikTok is so important. Bondy and I once wrote a chapter about the accountant audio meme. Basically, it was a guy in theater who was very semi-embarrassed about telling people, he's a struggling actor. What do you do for a job? I audition. It's not really a job. So he decided, I'm just going to tell people every time they ask that I'm an accountant. But you know what? In less than a week, that audio meme got taken over by sex workers. It was amazing, where they were flaunting stacks of cash with their really beautiful outfits and heels, talking about how they're going to a Christmas gathering, and an aunt asks, what do you do for a living? And they're like, I'm an accountant. And that different types of layering of how you can decode a meme that was originally from one context to another is a very amazing example of this transposition across the subcultures. Sound is a really playful way for us to do this, because I think by now, if we look at meme cultures, it has thus far been highly visual. We had macros memes of the cute cat with the cheeseburgers. We had memes as in jokes and two-liners. And then we had video memes. Now that we're moving into sound memes, I feel almost as if the internet users at large have opened up another space or another sense where they get to be more playful. You're playing with the tonality of someone's pitch or voice. You're playing with the drop in the music. You're playing with, very bad recorded playing of the Titanic, My Heart Will Go On, and that implies something about the quality of someone's statement. And that allows for less conventional forms of meme making, but it also makes it less understood and less penetrable to people who are, again, just pedestrians of your subculture. So again, very, very high uptake, very participatory, very optimistic about its power, but you need the buy-in. You need to already implicitly have that knowledge to know how to decode all this. Very long question, let me go to the last part. How do we balance between, let me try and find that question again.
I'll tell you. How do we both as users and scholars negotiate the dichotomy between agency and structure on TikTok?
Yeah, the informants that I study here, and on the one hand, when they say they claim they have a lot of agency, I'm realizing a pattern in that these are not the TikTokers who are depending on the creator fund for money. Oftentimes, they're influencers who already have income on elsewhere, and they're here on TikTok to expand their brand. So when they say things like, oh, I'm doing something new and it doesn't earn me money, but it's my creative labor, they actually have the privilege to say this and do this because they are of legacy fame from other platforms. But I have a smaller group of informants who accidentally went viral on TikTok and are now utilizing the creator fund as their first pool of income, or small business owners who previously owned Etsy shops who are now earning small streams of income on TikTok. For them in this space, they may say they want to be very creative. They may say they want to showcase their different types of lifestyles. But at the end of the day, to get visible on TikTok, there are structures, there are templates, there are very predictable routes for what sounds go viral, what memes to partake in as the trends change week by week. So there definitely is that tension there between, say, wanting to showcase yourself versus knowing what works, and then having to either sell out or keep yourself, or being able to say you're not a sellout, you're intentionally not monetizing because you have the privilege from other apps. Again, to put in context, these are influencers that I study who monetize attention for a living.
Crystal, I think throughout your discussion, you have touched on very interesting topics about this, the ways visibility is changing on TikTok, from the audio meme and the strategic use of audio on this platform, which is very important. I think we haven't discussed this enough today, maybe, but you have definitely touched on those very important points on the importance of audio to the difference, the popularity, the post-based popularity rather than the branding. And then the idea that you can adapt your persona to attract the specific users on TikTok and how that persona really changes on this platform. So I think those three aspects from what you said are really interesting. Now, although looking at the schedule, right now we should wrap up, because I am going to do the entire wrap up. I think we could go a little, just do one more question and I can cut my wrap up, because I think we're just in a very interesting discussion and we have a lot of really interesting questions. So let's look at one more question. And this one, although it's for anyone, maybe I'll pose it to Bondy because we haven't heard from you for a while. So this one says, from Pilar, it says, do you think that the strategies of the brands will succeed in their marketing on TikTok? So here she's mentioning Superman and Lois Lane. So I think it's interesting to note how big industry brands or the film industry, how they adapt to TikTok and how effective they could be on this platform.
Thanks, Daniela, and thanks, Pilar. That's a really interesting question. I will speak to what I know, and what I know is primarily music on TikTok, and I've been increasingly interested in the ways that music companies and musical artists are using the platform, for their own branding and to increase their profile. But it does seem like you go where the people are on whether it's social media or not. 20 years ago it would have been, not 20 years ago, 15 years ago it would have been YouTube, and 40 years ago it would have been the radio. So I think that because this is where there's so much activity, as Daniela mentioned in the introduction, 1 billion monthly users worldwide, there is a huge incentive, not just for music companies, but for brands more broadly, to get involved and try to promote their products or their personal brands on TikTok. It's interesting though when asking about whether they'll succeed in marketing strategies, because I do think that not so much from my own standpoint as a researcher, but it's just someone who's been on TikTok and who's seen different kinds of brands doing different kinds of things. There has been a need to kind of relearn social media strategy and social media marketing for a short video platform, because it's a different kind of a format than trying to make a YouTube ad or trying to do some of the viral marketing on text-based platforms like Facebook or Twitter. Even Instagram as a visual and also audiovisual platform had different kinds of logics that brands and companies were trying to adopt and incorporate before switching to the format of short video. And the successes of various like American football teams and the language app Duolingo, that seems to have just an absolute mad human being running their social media strategy, but doing all these crazy things. There are successes and there are failures, but all in all, people are trying to figure out, the terrifying Al, people are trying to figure out what works and what doesn't work on this short video platform. And if this is kind of the wrap up, and I'll just take this moment to there was another question about the creator fund that I think kind of ties into this. On the one hand, there's people trying to make money for their brands on TikTok, and on the other hand, there are people trying to make money for themselves on TikTok. And just kind of reflecting on some of the interviews that I conducted with TikTokers, some of whom were invited to join the creator fund and others who were invited but chose not to. It does seem like it sets an interesting precedent for how platforms might try to monetize creator or generate revenues for creators. And there's a lot of dissatisfaction that I've read and that I've heard from speaking with creators, and having a very opaque and nebulous pot of money that no one really knows how it works, or it's created a lot of questions. And the fact that Snapchat and YouTube have indicated a willingness to follow that same model, as opposed to an ad sharing revenue system that like YouTube has pioneered for a long time, it raises lots of future questions about the economic prospects of TikTok, both for the brands that are trying to remain relevant and viable, and for the creators who are, let's face it, responsible for the popularity and the prominence of these apps.
Thank you so much, Bondy. So at the end, creators are the ones really leading the way to see how TikTok will develop in the future, new forms of monetization. And of course, the brands have to adapt to this platform. And it will be interesting to see how they do this. So now it's time for the wrap up. It went really quickly, I must say. We have spent the past hour and 20 minutes, around 20 minutes, delving into themes of great interest, I think, for all of us and the audience. We have touched upon the idea of the geographic diversity embedded into TikTok and these experiences across countries, governments, and ethnicities. We have talked about platform governance, the moderation, the algorithm, and the content distribution, and how it has changed on this platform. We have also discussed new forms of popularity and new strategies for engagement that are deployed on this platform, and the material versus the digital aspects of TikTok. We did close with the monetization and the opaque nature of TikTok's creator fund, and this is definitely interesting because it really attracts new forms of content creation and new forms of micro-celebrity. I think it has been a really engaging discussion, and it has provided some answers, but also a lot to think about and reflect about in terms of what TikTok means, right, to the social media ecosystem, the future of this platform, and the various emerging trends taking place. I would like to thank first and foremost our audience, since we have people connecting from around the world, people who are awake in the middle of the night to be here, including Trevor. Thank you very much, Trevor, for being here today. You are really awake for you to be at 2 in the morning. This is a testament to the interest that this platform has inspired amongst researchers, students, and industry. Thank you for your insightful questions and your participation. I would also like to thank our panelists for sharing their work with us, Dr. Trevor Boffone, Dr. Bondy Valdovinos Kaye, Dr. Meg-Jing Zhang, Dr. Patrick Wickstrom, and Dr. Crystal Abidin. It has truly been a pleasure to be part of this timely discussion about TikTok. Now, I would like to give you some information to close up. First of all, these presentations are being recorded and they will be uploaded to tiktokcultures.com, and you can see there all of our previous events. So in case you weren't able to maybe wake up in the middle of the night to be here, you can watch it on our website. The Q&A and the chat box will not be uploaded. So for privacy, this is important. And now our next event, we're really excited to invite you to be part of the next event in the third and fourth quarter of 2022, TikTok and Diaspora and TikTok and Children. On Twitter, you can share information about these events using our handle and our hashtag. And finally, yes, there will be a form for you to become part of our research networks. I think it is we research TikTok, but we definitely share a lot of information. You can get updates on the latest research about TikTok. We do events, there are publication opportunities, collaboration, and definitely it is a great group to be a part of. I think that is all on time. We have still 7 minutes, so I think either I speak really quickly or I don't know if I missed something. I don't think so. So, important, yes. So we have some promo codes that are being shared on the I think on the Q and on the chat. You can take advantage of these. Also, if you sign up for the TikTok Cultures Research Network, you will receive emails to pre-order these books, especially the 2 that are upcoming, because of course the first one, Trevor Boffone's book, it is published, but you may want to really get onto those lists. And I just want to thank you and say goodbye. Thank you. I'm really excited to be here today.
Thank you, Daniela. Thank you, everyone, for participating in this. And I think with that, we will formally close. So see you soon at our next event. Bye, everyone.